Hello, I'm Hannah from the Lethbridge Transparency Council, and I'm here interviewing Bill Ginther, a city council candidate for Lethbridge. So we are doing our virtual interview here and I'm very excited. So thanks for joining us, Bill.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
Awesome. So I'm going to get started with the first question here. So the first question that I have for you is, what do you think needs improvement in the processes of the city council and administration? And how do you plan on making those improvements?
Well, yeah, I think it's a pretty simple answer. I think one of the things that I've noted over the years is that it seems to be that the council depends on administration to advise them, and that's exactly what they should do. But often the advising comes as a decision. Council or the administration will say to council, this is what we want you to do, and they say yes. I think there's got to be more where council makes the decisions that impresses upon the various different committees, the city manager, that here's what we want you to do as far as legwork and information gathering. But then when it comes to the actual decision, that's ours. That's not yours as a paid employee. So I think that's one of the first things that has to change. And maybe that's the answer to the second part of your question, that what would you do? I think we would just change that up to the point where council doesn't take direction from the administrative staff. They are hired people. The rest of us are elected. So I think it's vitally important that we make sure that we can request information from the city administration, city manager in particular, but then they need to respond to what our questions are, and we will make decisions based on what we think is important for the people that we represent.
Yeah, absolutely. The next question I have for you is, what recommendations would you make to engage more citizens in the city's municipal development plan process?
Well, I have to admit, I'm not that familiar with the municipal development plan. I have to practice that I say it right, because I always want to use different letters in there. But having said that, it's certainly something that I will learn more about. But I do want to say, and I'm going to ask you to ask that question one more time, because I got on a little different track. And so if you ask the question again, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. What recommendations would you make to engage more citizens in the city's municipal development plan process?
Okay, one of the first things that I have said from day one, when I threw my hat into the ring back in February, by far the first person, many still have not declared their intentions, and that is that I would like, and I will, do regular town hall meetings. Now, hopefully they're not virtual, because I've grown weary of virtual. I've grown weary of Zoom, but at the same time, I realize it's what we need to do. I think we should have town hall meetings, especially when there's issues of importance to people that live in the city, and things are important to people that live in the city because it affects them personally. I think I know I would do virtual, not virtual. I would do town hall meetings where you can sit there and actually take the questions of people. And a really big thing for me is that I think I'm different than some. I believe there's a big difference between listening and hearing. You can listen, anyone can listen, but to actually hear what people are saying. And that's why even the question you asked, I lost my train of thought for a moment, but I want to make sure that I'm answering the question you're asking. So I'm not afraid to say that, I didn't quite understand, or can you repeat that question? So I think it is consultation, it is listening to people, and those are things that are vital to run a city council where you're actually responding to what people have said.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that's a really good point about listening versus hearing. And I know that that's something we all need to work on, me included particularly. So,
well, my mom used to say, my late mother said that the good Lord gave us one mouth and two ears for a reason.
Yes, it's a point that I think we all need reminding every once in a while.
I certainly do.
Absolutely. So the next big question I have for you is, what do you think the three top issues are in our community, and what do you plan on doing to address those issues?
Well, I think they're very obvious to most people who show any interest or have a heart for our city. And one of them is community safety. Safety has become a really serious issue that we don't know for sure whether it's safe for us to walk in certain areas of the city. I know most cities have that, but ours is certainly enhanced by the number of people that are homeless, who to no fault of their own. As you know, I'm the director of the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, so I know our homeless neighbors, as I call them. I think safety has to be number one. Definitely has to be number one. We have to pay attention to how people's money is spent. Fiscal responsibility is vitally important, and we cannot just spend people's money left and right without consultation. So we need to be very careful that the tax dollars you pay, you should be happy to pay them because you know they're being used, for the purpose that you have asked. So public safety would be, really big issue because people need to feel safe. Number two, how well we spend people's money and that we do it wisely. Thirdly would be we need to take some responsibility for the homeless in our city. We really do not have any housing for our homeless. I know that's not something that'll get you elected because most people, sadly, don't really care much about the homeless. So I think we need to address the fact that we have well over 200 people in our city that are homeless. There are also many others that are on the verge of losing their homes. I think we need to do whatever we can to have affordable housing for all, and especially housing for those that are homeless.
Yeah, those are very well thought out. So with that in mind, you were talking about safety earlier, and I know that that's an issue that's come up, particularly in the business community as well. So what would you want the city to do to create a good environment for business in Lethbridge?
Well, the first thing, if we go back to the safety issue, one thing we shouldn't do, and so I'm going to answer the question in a negative way, and that is to defund the police. Is the last thing we should consider. If anything, the first thing we should do to make our downtown, where the bulk of the businesses are, we should make it safer by having policemen more visible. I think we should reintroduce the beat, where actually you, as a person, will see a police officer walking the beat. I think that's where you can respond. If I will phone the police, it's going to take at least 6 or 7 minutes to get there. If you and I are walking downtown and we see something dangerous or we feel in danger, we can call there's a police officer on foot half a block away. So I think that was something we really, really need to do in terms of the safety end. In terms of making business feel more wanted and needed, we need to make sure that we listen to what their concerns are. I think we need to have serious tax incentives for people to open up businesses in our city. I think we also need to have proper services for the homeless so they're not hanging downtown. The worst thing for a business is to have a whole bunch of people that are either drunk or high or asking you for money at the door of every business you go to. And I think we need to make sure that we have proper facilities for the poor, that they don't have to hang downtown. So again, there's the issue of making sure we have foot patrol, we'll call it, people that are readily available on bicycle, so that we have police right at our fingertips, so to speak. I even like the idea of having a community policing station, like a little storefront down, like right downtown, so people know that this is a safe community. And then, of course, the tax incentives are always something that makes it difficult because it erodes our tax base. When you give people incentives, they don't pay as much tax. But having said that, we need to be very creative in how we tax people. It can't just be based on how much can we get from every business. We need to encourage our businesses to come downtown. We need to diversify in a way that will happen if it's a safer place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That ties in. So the next question I have is about the MDP, and I know you'd mentioned that earlier. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to take a look at it, but what decisions in the MDP did you agree with or not agree with the city's most recent municipal development plan?
Yeah, I'm going to have to say that I have not had the opportunity because, I just sent you the request for the questions again, and we had 2 grandchildren over, so I had no chance. So I will always say from day one, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I would prefer not to answer a question I don't know enough about. It behooves me to learn, and I will. Our forums are coming up after we finally move aside this, what I call the unnecessary federal election. It's been thrown in our path, and we have a team of people going out on Monday night. We'll be placing our signage all around the city. And so I do not know enough about that plan. I will know about that plan long before October 18th. So at this point, I'm going to say that I think all of the planning the city has done, I think some of it has been done in such a way that it has not engaged people, has not consulted the voters at all. Now, I know one of the things that's part of the plan, I think, is the new revised busing system. And I think that from my perspective, I was never asked. I'm a citizen. I'm a tax-paying person in the city. I was never asked what I thought about the bus system. Granted, I don't ride the bus, and I probably should. but I don't, because I live downtown. I'm close to where I need to be. I don't need to ride the bus. But having said that, I think what we do is we also, from what I understand, again, I stand corrected, is that that whole process was done by an external body who came into the city, who was hired, for a fairly large sum of money to come in and assess all the different departments of the city. And what they ended up doing is eliminating, I think, 61 different positions, if I'm talking about the same program. And what they did is, I know one person who has worked for the city for, I think, 18 years, and all they did is look at her job description. And yet, when asked about this person's role, they said, well, we didn't know all of the things she did outside of her job description. I know that. I'm the director of the soup kitchen. I pick up food from people. I am also the person who does the human resources. I do all the fundraising. I do all the volunteer coordination. So, but that's not in my job description. So I think we need to look carefully at job descriptions, but we also need to look, what are people actually doing? So I think, again, that's part of that whole plan. I think what I would think about the plan, it needs more consultation. I think some councillors think that once they're elected, they can just make whatever decision they want that suits them. I want to go on record as saying I will not only make decisions that I like. It's got to be decisions that I hear that people want. The only way that they can be involved with those decisions, if you have town hall meetings or places where they can actually have a discussion. You don't have to agree with everybody, but you can also listen to what the majority wants, and you have to vote with what the majority of the people want. If people don't come to these well-arranged regular meetings, then that tells me that they're not as interested as I think they are, and then I have to vote with what I think I understand. And if that makes sense, but that's kind of my response to that question.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I appreciate you recognizing that there's obviously still a lot to learn, and we all need to take some time to learn things. Absolutely. So that the next question that I have for you is about transportation. So I know you were talking about the bus system earlier. So our current plan prioritizes transportation development with pedestrians prioritized first, and then bicycles, transit, commercial vehicles, and the last being just regular cars. So how would you prioritize transportation in Lethbridge? What do you see as important?
Well, I guess it depends on what we mean by transportation. It's a pretty big word. But if we break it down between pedestrians and cyclists and other forms of transit, well, the only reason you have transit period is to transport people. So the focus has to be on the people. And if you just set up a program that is set up so it's efficient, it looks better, that the buses aren't all empty, then you need to focus on that. But first of all, we've got to have the city set up in such a way that, number one, we go back to safety. We've got to feel safe. You have to feel safe walking our streets. You can't be looking over your shoulder all the time. So I think you have to put the priority on the pedestrian, the person. It's the person that we're moving. No matter what mode of transportation you have, it's the person we're moving. So there was a group years ago called People First. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. You're probably way too young to know that, but it was people first. You concentrate on the people and then you go from there. So whatever transportation method we focus on, whether it is pedestrian, whether it's bicycle, whether it's bus, all of those are used only to transport people. And so people first. We need to know what the people need first, and you don't know that unless you ask them. People have to feel safe in it walking. They need to feel safe on their bicycles. Bicycle lanes, bicycle paths are of utmost importance. We need to be more active, and we need to do that in a way that I feel safe. I shouldn't have to wonder if the car that's coming towards me is going to run me over. There should be more respect for bicycles. Our transit system, I don't understand at all why we have buses of the sizes we do. I have yet to see a bus other than on its way to university or college that's full. 90% of the day, they are not full. I see many buses go by with one person in it. Why can't we look at a way of putting on smaller buses at certain times of the day? What would be wrong with having, a larger bus when we need it and a smaller bus when we don't? To me, that would make sense in terms of spending, in terms of wise use of resources. But overall, I want to say whatever transportation we plan, it's got to be people first. That would be my focus.
That's a really good kind of leeway into the last section here, which is just talking about city finances.
Right.
So one of the questions I have for you is, where do you think the city should spend more money and why?
Well, people should spend, I mean, the city administration should and council should spend money where it benefits the most people. We have to look at the dynamics or the what's the other word? Not dynamics, but people, age groups. I know the word demographic of our city. We have a large senior population in the city. I happen to be one myself, but we have ignored that segment. We really have. We've just said, well, they can manage on their own. They're old enough, they can do that. We've got to do better in terms of spending money on sidewalks that are accessible to people. I've seen very many people stumble on the edge of a raised sidewalk when they just can't lift their feet. Now, you wouldn't know that because you're not nearly there. But having said that, we need to really prioritize our spending where it affects the most people. I think we need to be really careful that we spend money on making sure that our parks are well maintained. I don't think we want to see a park that's overrun with weeds. I don't. And I make sure my own yard, our own yard, is maintained where it looks like somebody lives there. I don't want to see that happen in our city. I think we want to make sure that we have proper parks. I think we want to make sure that our city is accessible to everyone. Vital importance. I think we need the arts. We vitally need the arts. All of us get involved in roles that are highly stressful. I think we need to have the opportunity to unwind and go to a theater that's large enough to house us. That's costs money, but people will be willing to spend money if they benefit from it. I'm excited about the addition of the new building at the exhibition. I know that's not city money, but that's a huge, biggest building we have in the entire city. It's the biggest project we've ever had. And I love that our city our businesses, our organizations are willing to invest in our city because we invest in them. So I think really we need to listen to where the money should be spent. We need to spend it where it benefits the most people. We need to spend it in a way that provides safety and good parks that we enjoy, and also places that we can have good entertainment for our enjoyment and to better our health. If that makes sense, but that's my approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are all really good points. So where do you think the city should spend less money?
I'm not sure there's a place where they should spend less. You will hear people say, and I'm not saying this, but people will say we shouldn't have public art, where you put an art installation and spend a lot of money and it sits there for years and doesn't do anything. But having said that, I don't agree that's where we shouldn't spend it. I don't know. I'm not convinced that the salaries of the city councilors are where they should be. I think they should be considerably less. It's only a part-time job. Now, it depends on who you ask, but it is considered a part-time job. All of the current councilors have their own a business or another job. So I think we need to pare down what we do there. I think the city has tried to reduce the number of staff. Now, that's painful for everybody, but knowing what I know now, which isn't as much as it will be later, I don't know of areas where we could spend less. I really don't. I think we are running a very lean ship already, or we run a tight ship. And I think that we are doing well. I think taxes could be less, but I don't know where you could reduce. I don't see any obvious areas where we should cut. I think we're doing well. I'm not excited about everything, but overall, I think that this council would get a pretty good grade, except for some things like the consumption site and all that kind of stuff. But that's another story for another time.
Yes, it is. So earlier you mentioned consultation. So what criteria do you recommend the city examine prior to approving large capital projects?
Well, I think people have to have a say. I really think, number one, can you afford it? In your own home, if you can't afford something, you shouldn't buy it or you're going to indebt yourself, right? We have taught our kids that all along, don't spend money you don't have, because you're going to have to pay for it. You're going to pay a lot more. The same with us. We need to look at projects, number one, that people are requesting. What are people asking? What are people saying? This is my city. This is what I would love to have. And if a large enough percentage of people say we need something, we need to find creative ways to fund it. Like, here's an example, and this has nothing to do with your question necessarily, but a third bridge. Do we need a third bridge? Well, yes, kind of, but not yet. because really only 1/3 of our population goes to the west side on a regular basis. I don't go there often unless we go visit our kids. I don't go shopping there because the options aren't there. We have a bridge already. Yeah, it's busy a certain time of the year, but I would be fully in favor of doing that bridge if we can find alternate funding options rather than the taxpayer dollar. There's got to be ways. I come from the city of Saskatoon 8 years ago. Saskatoon, the years I lived there, there was never a time a bridge was not under construction. It's called the City of Bridges. There's probably 9 bridges, and they're probably building 2 as we speak. How do they do that? We need to look and learn from others. How do they fund capital projects? It can't just be the taxpayer's dollar. We need to be creative in what we do. We need to develop a very positive and constructive relationship with levels of government beyond our own so that we can convince them that this project is important. So there's got to be consultation with people. Only build or create programs that people want. Now, not everyone wants the same thing, and I know that. And that brings me to a point where I say my role would be to satisfy most of the people most of the time, knowing that it's impossible to satisfy everyone.
It definitely is. Somebody will always be unhappy. That's kind of the way that life works.
Oh,
We can't make everybody happy, but
you never will.
No, never. That discussion though leads us really well into our last question, which is just looking at the City of Lethbridge Capital Improvement Program plan for the next 4 years. So looking at those big capital projects, which 2 expenses are you most in favor of, and which 2 expenses would you not support?
Well, I'm not as familiar with that as I should be, but I do know that one of them is performing arts, I think, that we need to, do we need a new one? And the answer for me is similar to what I said before. We do need to have a proper, for a city this size, we need to have a proper performing arts center, because it's not only entertainment, it's all the lessons that go on, all the dance lessons and all of that. So that is, I know it's a huge expenditure coming up, and I think we need to do that, but we need to make sure that people want it. I wished it had been on the ballot. You know, there's 2 questions on the ballot. One of them is whether we favor a ward system, and the other is whether we should look at the possibility of constructing a bridge by 2030. Both are very important questions. I think that's a great step towards involving the public in saying how they feel. Otherwise, there's no opportunity. So both of those, I think, are really, really important. I don't know enough about the capital spending plan for the next 4 years, but I do want to tell you that I'm not convinced that the new council will necessarily just go along with what the old council decided. I think there's going to be some real assessment of all of the plans for the future, not to throw them out, but to really analyze them and go through them with a fine-tooth comb with these questions. Is that what people want? Is that really where we should be spending our money? And secondly, can we afford this? Is this something if we need it, who's going to pay for it, and how are we going to do that? So I think instead of responding to specific issues, which I've touched on a couple, we need to take a look at the whole thing and re-examine the decisions that have been made by new people that will be making that decision on behalf of people that elected them.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Bill. That was the last question that I have for you, but is there anything that you would like to say just to wrap it up?
Well, I could just end by saying vote for me, but that's not an appropriate way of approaching it. I'm hoping that I've left people with enough of a feeling of who I am, with nothing to hide. Now I'll refer to a couple of things that are on my campaign information sheet, which is going into people's mailboxes this week. But the first thing I want to say to people: please come out and vote. Like, exercise your democratic right. This is, exercise your franchise. This is not important to many people, but I have visited 54 countries in my previous life doing international relief and development work. There are countries, many countries, they would literally give your arm in order to have an opportunity to vote. We had 27% last time. And, there's no sense scolding people that are not hearing you, but I think we can do better. I think we should be in the 70%. And I think all of us are going to say, people, just vote. And when people say to me, why should I vote? Nothing changes. I reverse that question and say, nothing changes because you don't vote. So go out and vote, people. This is your right. This is your responsibility. And then the other side of that is, don't complain if you don't vote. You need to exercise your franchise. And one of the things that I really want to focus on is that my campaign is going to be not platform-based, because anyone can say what I'm going to do, but I have no authority to build a bridge. There's no way I can do that. promises, sadly, in politics are designed to not be met. They're designed to be broken because you cannot. How can I, as one person, tell you what I'm going to do? I will work alongside other people to try to do what's best for you, not for me. So I'm basing my campaign on honesty, integrity, accountability, fiscal responsibility, spend money very wisely, active listening, not only listening, but hearing. To me, that's vital. Common sense. Common sense is no longer common. We need to reintroduce that. And finally, my promise to people is that I will exercise servant leadership. That's not something that is widely known, but it's leadership by serving people. You serve them, you step up. I'm the director of a soup kitchen. My staff, our staff will tell you that Mr. Bill, as I'm called, will never ask us to do a thing that he wouldn't do himself. So for me to go out and clean the parking lot is no problem. I may be the boss, I may be the director, it doesn't matter. I want to lead by serving. So servant leadership is vitally important to me.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. Just to echo, yes, please go out and vote. We have one of the lowest municipal turnout rates of any city in the province and also
Canada.
federally. So please go out and vote October 18th or advanced voting. Thank you so much for doing this interview, Bill. I really appreciate
very welcome.
your time. So
my pleasure. Thanks for showing interest in what's happening in the city and for whoever wrote the questions for the well-worded questions.